All right. Hey, now, Rob here, Rob School of Music. We are hanging out on a special Thursday session with Mr. Mark Holcomb from Periphery, Haunted Shores. Overall, just sick guitar player, a PRS friend, and just a man amongst men. Hello and welcome.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure. We've been trying to pull this off. Just so everybody knows, we've been trying to pull this off for a minute. And by a minute, I mean what, 8 months or something like that. It's just between my schedule and I know your slate of guests and the work that you do. It's been some work to get this thing lined up, but I'm happy to be here, man. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for
Thank
having me.
Absolutely, dude. Like, well worth the wait in every way. I've really been, excited for this. And I just think it's going to be awesome. So thank you for your time in advance. And I guess I'll start it off with the kind of the first question I ask everyone, and it doesn't really matter the instrument. Just as a musician, what happened in your world? Was there a particular record or a show or something you saw where you're like, that's what I want to do? I want to be a musician.
Yeah, for me, it was, oh man, what was the year? Okay, the first Foo Fighters record, the one with the gun on it, right? Like, I think it was a self-titled album.
Mhm.
Um, MTV had Foo Fighters basically perform that record front to back, I think, and they televised it back when MTV had actual music on their channel, like good music. And I forget what venue, some big venue in New York, but basically they played the whole record front to back. And Dave Grohl had a Gibson Explorer, and he looked so badass. And it wasn't metal, but still, he had this sort of aura and presence and just confidence about him, like just handling the crowd, killing the songs, sang great. Just he was looking like he was having the time of his life, and he just looked powerful. And I was a little pimple faced 12, 13-year-old kid at the time, insecure, needed something to latch onto, got bullied at school, all that shit, like all of the, stereotypical dazed and confused nerd kind of cliches. That was me. And I saw that and I was just like, I was entranced, and I wasn't even a fan of music. I liked Nintendo 64. That was like all I liked when I was a kid. And I liked a little bit of sports, but I had torn ligaments in my knee leading up to that. So it's like I was immobilized from that. I couldn't play basketball. And I saw that and I was just like, I want to learn guitar. I have to learn how to play guitar. Never thinking that I could like be that, but I was just like, this looked like so much fun. And I took a lesson, like I think weeks later in the fall of 1995. And yeah, I always look back to that moment as just when I fell in love with the actual physical act of playing guitar and being on stage, and what that could transform you into, like. And looking back on it, it's like Dave Grohl was always behind the scenes in Nirvana, and he was never sort of front and center in the limelight. But Jesus, he looked like a completely different person with a guitar in his hands, just handling a whole big venue like that. So yeah, that was probably the sort of initial spark before I went down the full metal hole.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that Foo Fighters record, because I have a distinct memory when that first came out also. Like, I'll be 39 this year. So like middle
Oh,
school, 7th grade, I think is when that record was for me. And music was just coming in. I remember when I remember when Nirvana ended. I remember all of that. I remember Kurt Cobain, taking his life, but I was young. Like, it didn't
yeah.
shake me. But I remember the feeling of, well, this guy was in Nirvana. Let's pay attention. And
Hmm.
similar thing, like, he is just such an animal, like, front guy up there killing
Yeah.
it, and just the showmanship of it all. I totally understand that. I mean, I think the visual component of listening to music in a live forum is almost as important as what you're hearing, because it just hits you from every angle. If someone's having a good time on stage, you're gonna have a good time watching it usually.
Yeah. Yeah. It's palpable. And that's something I've learned even in recent years, performing with Periphery. I mean, tours get long, tours can be arduous, they can be very difficult for many different reasons. And at the end of the day, you know, you're up there because you love doing it, even if it's week 6 of a European tour in the middle of winter.
Mm.
You got to get up there, and you have to play it like it's your first show. You have to enjoy every single moment up there as if it was your first time doing it. Otherwise, it comes across in a very negative. And I've seen bands before where I'm like, Jesus Christ, like I paid $55 to see this show and they look like they hate each other up there, which they probably do. Um, but there are bands out there who I know, just an example, literally do hate each other, but they get up there and everything goes out the window. It's just like they're 18-year-olds in a garage for the first time. So that's always been a big part of my approach. And I think I still go back to that moment as an example of how to let everything go and have fun doing what you're doing up on stage every night.
Well, that actually brings me into the next thing I wanted to ask, almost perfectly. Thank you. Just set me up. I like it. um, a lot of the students here, we're a music school. I didn't say that in the beginning for anyone who's going to watch this. We have a physical location about 40 minutes outside of Manhattan in New York, and we do virtual lessons all around. And a lot of our students come on board towards the beginning of their musical journey, younger as a musician, not in age, but just as a musician. And a big thing we do, pre all this stuff, and then currently now finally again, is we put them in groups and we let them perform publicly, and stage fright and nerves just beat the
Oh,
shit out of them. And I'm always curious, you've played epic stages, epic tours, and there's so many things with your show and everything with the lights and the patch changes and the technical prowess to perform that music. How do you handle all of the pressure?
that's something I'll talk about a lot. Yeah, I'm really happy to talk about this subject actually. It's something that I always dreaded when I was learning guitar in the late 90s. Like, and I aspired to be in a band. I really wanted to be in a band. But then I thought to myself, I'm like, how am I going to muster up the courage to play a show when I can't even get in front of my history class with like 18 people and talk about the Civil War without pissing my pants, you know? Um, it's a real thing. Like public speaking for me was not something that ever came naturally.
Me too.
And on top of that, like I'm a pretty private person. Like I would choose, if I were to choose any other job in the public sector aside from music, it probably wouldn't involve public speaking in any way. Um, the thing with being on stage and having the courage to prepare for it, I always look at it as preparing for a presentation, right? Like if you're going to go in front of your history class and talk about the Civil War, if you're well read and well prepared and you have everything mapped out in your head because you've spent hours and hours and hours not cramming, but learning over time and making it so everything is second nature as opposed to something which you have to actively call back and forth from in your head, things are going to be way more effortless. And when it comes time for you to get up and do your thing in the moment for real, it's going to feel like less of a battle if all of your moves, all of your go-tos are already mapped out and they already feel like second nature. So for me, getting over stage fright is tied 1000% to the amount of preparation and homework I do before I go into it, which is why, I mean, look, I know a lot of people who sort of get off on improvisation. You know, these guys who can get up there and just let it rip, improvise in front of 1,000 people, and that's their wheelhouse. That's not my wheelhouse, nor is it really the comfort zone of any of my bandmates. That's except for maybe Matt. Our drummer Matt likes to go off and play all kinds of different stuff over our music every night. And that's awesome. But that's never been me. I've always been sort of more focused on the songs and what I'm performing as opposed to, what solo can I invent over the section every night. Um, but because of that, I can sort of hone in on exactly what I need to do, what I need to know weeks, months before a tour, and by the time the show comes up and I have the butterflies, which are inherent, it's normal to have butterflies. It's normal to feel a little bit of like, oh my gosh, like today's the show. Oh my God, we got to go on stage in half an hour. It's normal to feel that. So that's one thing that I want to dispel for anybody who feels insecure about getting up on stage and is somewhat timid of being on stage. Um, Butterflies are normal. The more preparation, the more comfortable you can be in advance, the less you have to actually worry about getting over, or sorry, about, fucking up a part. I will say this though. I've beaten myself up way too hard over the years for messing up on stage, for messing up a guitar riff, and that can be your own worst enemy. It can get you up here.
Mhm.
It can get you stuck in your head. You mess up once or you blow a solo, And some people let it linger in their system for weeks and months and sometimes years, and it can really deter you from getting back up on stage. It's like a comedian bombing, you know. Um, when comedians bomb, they tend to never try it again. And the best ones, I've always heard, the best stand-up comedians are the ones who can bomb, who can just train wreck, and then next week be like, "Yep, yeah, do it again."
Yeah.
It's like that's insane to me, but it takes a different type of person to do that for a living. With music, I feel like it's a little bit less magnitude, but it's the same kind of principle. It's just letting the negative stuff bounce off of you in a live setting if you happen to not perform up to par.
I love that. I love all of that, man, because I always tell the bit of advice I give the students as they're performing, and something I've kind of taught myself along the way is the show's already happened. Like if you're
Mhm.
prepped and you're ready and you know your shit, then it's going to be what it's going to be. So
Mhm.
do the
Yep.
homework and be ready. And then you just can kind of offload all that stress and just go on autopilot because you know what you're doing. So,
Exactly. Yeah, and there's like I said, the butterflies is real.
mhm.
I still have little things here and there, like I'll get nervous sometimes, and I still have sort of coping mechanisms, like deep breathing exercises. Meditation is something that I've relied on as of late. Some people like to have a drink or two. I wouldn't really recommend that because that's not a reliable way to cancel out nerves.
Yeah.
So I don't subscribe to that, but I know a lot of old school guys who do. Um, but for me, it's just like you said, it's just laying the foundation. It's just the homework. Be as well prepared as you can, and if it doesn't go as well as it could have, you really couldn't have done anything more.
Mhm.
At least if you get up there and mess up, it's like, well, I couldn't have done anything more. What's the absolute worst is if you failed to prepare and you get up and you train wrecked and you know whose own fault. You know it's your own fault. You have
Yep.
no one else to blame. So I try my best to avoid that situation whenever I can.
Totally, man. Yeah, I completely, so much value in that entire story. So thank you. Let's get into music and some musical things. I obviously want to dig into the new singles and the new record and all that stuff. Void coming out on March 11th, correct?
Yep.
Only Fangs shreds blew my face right off. I had to reassemble it before we sat down today, so excuse the disfigurement. Um, um, your playing is so solid and technical and live on the recording, so consistent. What's your practice routine like? How did it get what have you learned along the way? What are some things that you do every time, things that you used to do, don't do? Like what goes into becoming Mark?
I'll start with the negative, just that's how I always evaluate myself as a player. The negative side is that I don't practice enough. So that's one thing that like I used to be really good at in my early years of playing. Now my practice is always tied to the creative process. Like so when I'm writing, I'm usually tracking as I write. So like I'm writing in front of a computer, I'm writing in front of a click track and a program drum beat. Um, and I found that for me, at least in the last 10, 12 years, my playing has really gone up several levels because I'm able to hear myself under a microscope, which is in the studio, in front of good monitors and in front of a DAW, um, being able to hear, oh, wow, I tracked it way tighter on the left side than I tracked it on the right side.
Mm,
What am I doing differently? Can I track it to a point where I can get it sounding like one guitar, two sides of guitar sounding solid together? And that takes work. I feel like people who don't record themselves underestimate how hard it is to play tight, right on the click or a little bit behind if you want to have a little bit of pocket. Um, it's not something that you can teach to somebody without just giving them the tools, like leaving a guitarist alone in the room with a computer and saying, "Hey, churn out this section with tight track guitars left and right. See how long it takes you." It's tough,
mhm.
and you have to be able to practice to get better at it. So I feel like every step I've sort of climbed in the past 10, 12 years is because I've recorded myself. Um, and in the early days, and I feel like this is what sort of made me fall in love with guitar, but maybe from 95 until 2005, my way of practicing guitar was just to always have it in my hands, just to always have it in my hands, whether I'm watching sports on TV or whether I'm watching somebody else play a video game or something like that. I always have my hand doing something on the fretboard. It's just to have it there, just to have it so I know what it feels like. I can get comfortable with the feeling of the neck. And if my right hand is doing something else, maybe checking my phone, my left hand will be on a guitar. It's always in my hand, just so I have this sense of familiarity with it. And that's something that I still do. But I remember spending a lot of time just with an electric guitar. I think I had an Epiphone Les Paul back in the day, but just not even plugged in. Just my
Mhm.
whole family sitting around watching a movie, and I have it in my hands, just noodling. I can't hear myself, just practicing moves, just getting the time in, and I feel like that's something I've gotten a little bit worse at over the years, is making sure I dedicate the proper amount of time to guitar. But again, I think it's just evolved due to the nature
Mhm.
of Periphery and my career over the past 10 years. It's like I have less amount of time to work off of during the day, and you know, the creative side is something that's near and dear to my heart. So I almost have to I almost have to put more of my time into being creative these days.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Totally. It's interesting you say with the holding the guitar, because coming up, I used to do that too. I drive my
Yeah.
family crazy because they're like, "Why is your guitar everywhere?" I'm like, "I don't know. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm sitting in a room. Let me see if I can pan out so you can see what the hell's going on in here. I mean, it's just there's an absurd
Oh,
amount of
let me have
guitars
it.
in here because I just love guitars.
Yeah.
And I tell my students, like, if I give you homework, and it's say work on this lick or whatever it is, and over the course of the week between lessons, maybe you do 10 other things, but you didn't do what I told you to do. Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
little bit bummed, but you're bonding with the instrument because whenever
Mhm.
it's in your hands, you're learning, oh, well, there's another E over here. I didn't know there was another E over here. And
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
I completely understand all of that.
Yeah. Bonding with the guitar is probably the most important thing, because I remember one of the big roadblocks for a lot of my peers when I was a teenager was, like, my buddy would learn guitar, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I tried learning this Metallica solo, but I couldn't do it. So you know what? Like, it just sucks. Guitar sucks." And then they would just never play again, and it's, to me, the gap between me and some of those kinds of friends was this sense of attachment to it, this level of bonding. I almost said bondage,
Yeah.
but
Well, that too.
that's something different. Um, Bonding with the instrument that never left me, despite how frustrated I would get if I was trying to learn an Yngwie section or a Marty
Mhm.
Friedman, solo or something like that. Is, yeah, I'm not good enough for this, but you know what? I still love this freaking instrument. I can always just play a Foo Fighter song. I can always just play a freaking Ramon song on it and fall in love with it all over again.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So you mentioned the creative part of it. So obviously, I really want to go into what you guys, Periphery, you put out records, you tour the cycle, and then everyone kind of has their own little side things they're doing and different combinations of members, which I love because it's like Periphery is like the tree, and then there's like different
Yeah.
branches where you guys
Yeah.
kind of go into these little niche things that are just like a little different than when you're creating stuff creatively. Do you start off saying, well, this is going to be a Periphery riff, or this is going to be something different? Like, what is the process there?
I think priority always goes to Periphery, and that always has to be at the front of our minds. Like, when I come up with a riff that I'm like stoked on, when I say to myself, "Yeah, this is killer," my mind always goes to Periphery first. But then if I have the realization, be like, "Ah, you know what? It's too fast," or "There's no room for vocals," then my mind starts going to other places. Like, maybe it'll work for Haunted Shores, or fall in some other kind of category. But going back to what you're saying about the tree and the branch analogy, that's completely correct. I mean, without Periphery, I'm not sure anybody would care about our side projects. I'm not sure anybody would care about anything that we do, frankly, between all the other work we do on the side of Periphery. So that's the big one. That's what sort of we have to keep at the front and center of our lives. And in the creative process, when I say that Periphery takes priority, for example, there was a Haunted Shore song that I was working on last year. It's kind of like the slow, dreamy, RPG sounding. Just, I don't know, I really love the song, and I brought it to Misha, and he and I fleshed it out together. And one of our other band members heard it in the band Dropbox. He was like, "Hey, what is this?" I think it was our drummer Matt. He's like, "What is this? What is this for Periphery?" And I was like, "No, it's actually a Haunted Shore song. Or it was gonna be one." And he was like, "What if we use it for Periphery? What if we change some things here and there?" And we showed it to our singer Spencer, and he loved it. And it was like, okay, maybe we change it. Maybe we have like peripherize this, so to speak. And we did. And it's going to be on the next Periphery record. So it, it just it just takes priority over everything. And everything needs to shift around in order to mold to Periphery, because that is the sort of original passion project. Like, you can describe Haunted Shores as a passion project, with Periphery being the sort of thing that resides over it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Periphery reigns. you know
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you, because all you guys live in different states, right? Like you're not in the same state. I don't think any of you, to my knowledge. So like, how does the writing happen? Is it you put the riff in a Dropbox and then Jake grabs it or Misha grabs it, or like what is?
Yeah, that's a good question. It used to be like that. It used to be purely remote. Ironically, we lived in Washington D.C. at the same time, so it was weird. Like, we just didn't meet up to write music in the same room very often. We would email ideas back and forth. We would write ideas and then put them in the Dropbox. Now we do a little bit of that. So I'll write ideas, put them in the Dropbox, and then the guys will chime in and say whether they like it or not. Misha will do the same. Jake will do the same. Spencer will do the same. um, and we'll get together in one place when it comes time to write, and then work on that idea or whatever myriad ideas in person in the same room. And that's when the real sort of Periphery writing process begins. I would say that that's when it begins in earnest. All the preparation is done on our own. We'll write riffs on our own, and we'll see, we'll get the basis for something. But then as soon as we get together, that's when the real ideas start flying. That's when things start getting put together. We start writing riffs from scratch in the same room. Yeah, that's truly the sort of beginning for us.
Has it ever occurred where one of you guys will come up with a riff, but then find that someone else is executing it in a more, I don't want to say better, that's the wrong word, but like, I don't know, better, I guess.
Yeah. No, I'm dude. I can't even begin to tell you the process and the journey we've been on. As far as learning how to deal with the phenomenon you're talking about. Where, okay, hypothetical, which may or may not be based in reality. Um, I come up with a riff that I'm super proud of, and I meet up with the guys and I track it after one of Jake's riffs just to see if it'll fit. And I love it. And I think it fits perfectly. And the other guys are like, man, there's still something off about it. Maybe we could try Misha's riff here. I mean, we could try another one of Jake's riffs here. And then it fits better according to them. But to me, I'm sitting there like, oh man, I don't know. And you're sort of at a crossroads. You can acquiesce and you can come at it diplomatically and from an angle of trust in my bandmates, and say that, you know what, this is a band. This is not about me. This is not the Mark Holcomb project. This is Periphery. Or you can have all this resentment and, sort of hang your head and be like, yeah, sure, fucking whatever you guys want. Or, or put your foot down. That's a third option. Put your foot down and say, you know what? No, I'm not going for it. And I've been to all three of those places, as have we all in the band. And those are poisonous paths in a work environment. And I get it. If you're Yngwie Malmsteen, or if you're Devin Townsend, or if it's a solo project, anything that you say goes. And that's kind of the nature of those kinds of projects. It's the beauty of a solo project. With a band, it has to be about everybody involved, especially if everything, top to bottom, politically, financially, creatively, everything is split evenly amongst 5 people in this band. So if that scenario happens, there needs to be a sense of self-awareness and a discipline that enables you to step back and say, okay, I'm really stoked on my idea, but it's not about me right now. It's not about me. It's about a team. It's almost like a sport. It's almost
Mhm.
like being part of a hockey, basketball, baseball team, football team. It's not about the me in this right now. I'm part of a unit. I'm part of a group. I had to have trust in my teammates, in my colleagues, to go the right way collectively, not just what I think is right, and to be able to handle it with grace, and just class. That's something that's taken us a long time to learn how to do professionally and functionally. Because when you pull that off, when you're able to sort of sacrifice what you think is good in order to do what's best for everybody collectively, that's when the real emotional investment begins. And once you settle on that, you're like, oh my gosh, this is my family. You know, this is where I belong, because I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who know how to be this way. It's a really, really awesome feeling. And in any workplace, if you happen to find this balance, no matter what you do, it's a magical feeling when you're surrounded by people who can leave their egos at the door.
I think also like hearing stories like that, as a fan and as a musician and anyone listening who's in bands, like three guitar players is a lot of
Yeah.
guitar. And I
Yeah.
think being able to hear you explain it like that is so inspiring to anyone who's putting together any kind of multi-instrument project or band, because that's obviously the way to make it work. And nothing else is going to work. You just got to be cool and with grace. I love that. Awesome.
Yeah, it's a prerequisite, really. And I would urge any of you out there, if you're in bands and you're having trouble with personnel who like, oh, this guy always does that thing where he gets upset and he storms off at practice, and he's just grumbling and griping about nobody liking his ideas, then maybe have a second thought about whether that person's right for your family. Because to me, up there with talent and up there with creativity, you have to have that in your workplace. Don't forget band. Band is just some, a form of a workplace, but like any workplace, you have to have those kinds of people on board. Unless you're a dictatorship, unless you're, Vladimir Putin, or 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 whatever project, the solo project, then you don't have to sacrifice anything for anybody.
Yep. Yep. So let's go into the new record, man. Like when did the writing start? Like how does it so once you have a batch of songs that you're like, these are not Periphery songs, these will be Haunted Shores songs, like do you then hang with Misha and put it together? Two singles are out. Like what is walk us through the whole thing. Pretend, no one knows
Yeah.
anything.
So I guess everything starts with Periphery, man, because, and this is why 7 years, it took 7 years to do another Haunted Shores record, because
Yeah, that's
Periphery
what I'm
just,
saying. Like
yeah,
it's why
yeah.
now? Awesomely now, but why now?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic slowed everything down. Obviously, we canceled all of our tours on the Periphery side, and from the very beginning, there were discussions about, let's do another Periphery record. Let's do it. Let's mobilize. Let's begin writing. Let's start planning, writing, and recording trips together. Um, and once it became apparent that that process was going to move a lot slower, because we all live so far from each other, and there were travel restrictions because of COVID, and everything, I kind of pivoted mentally, and I was like, okay, I'm going to write for Periphery, but I'm also going to write for Haunted Shores. And then I just began sort of going down this rabbit hole on my own here in Austin, Texas, just kind of paying homage to old black metal and old death metal records and old thrash records that I loved, that I knew was not for Periphery, right? Like, because that's Periphery's not a thrash metal band, Periphery's not a death metal band, it's not a black metal band, and I want to do something like that. And I just began writing like crazy, like just writing from 9 to 5,
Oh
treating it
wow.
like a day job here at home. Just wake up, have coffee and breakfast, and then write all day. Take a lunch break, quit before dinner, um, and I would do that for weeks. And it got to a point where I had, the basis of a record. I didn't have a full record. I had, the foundation of it. And then I met up with Misha, and I took, I want to say, 3 trips out there for writing, and he and I just sort of finished up the songs one by one. And he and I have a very, very natural sort of musical relationship together. We're almost like, guitar siblings. Like we kind of just know, we know how this needs to sound. We know how we want it to come across, and we know exactly what each other are going for in any given moment with Haunted Shores and Periphery. And with Haunted Shores, it was almost like this. All right, we know we're not playing these songs live ever. It's not going to ever tour. Let's make it as crazy and just brutal and extreme as possible, and have fun with it, and not make this a ton of work. Make it this like free for all, just whatever it wants to be. And that's what Haunted Shores was. It was a really nice sort of freeing outlet from what Periphery is, because Periphery is a much more difficult thing to write for. You know, there's 5 very vocal producer minds in the band,
Right.
and to get anything done, even to write one riff and have it be the riff in the song, is it's going to take time. You need to pass all these levels of checks and balances to make it. So with Haunted Shores, it's just this much more direct and easier process, and a quicker process, if I'm honest.
That makes sense, though. And that's kind of
Yeah.
cool because if it's going to be something stepping outside, it should
Hmm.
be fun, right? They
Got to
take
be
away
fun.
all the, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what, like I said, OnlyFans is just absurd. Um, any specifics to putting that one together?
OnlyFans. Whew. That was one where I said, okay, I forget, I think the BPM is like 230 or 240 or something like that. Something stupid. I don't know. Pardon me if I'm wrong, but I just set the BPM in Cubase and I programmed a bunch of thrash beats, blast beats, and death metal, just crazy nonsense thrash beats. And I was like, all right, I'm going to experiment in writing little bits of a riff at a time. Because historically, the way I've always written is like, I'll just have an amp and a guitar and I'll write. And if I come up with something that sounds cool, I'll record it on my phone, you know, and I'll save it for when I'm in front of a computer. But with that song and most of this record, it was composed in Cubase. So like a lot of the notier riffs, I think like the first verse in Onlyfangs, or both verses actually, um, it was written like a measure or two at a time. Sorry, I'm going to put this move that I like at the beginning of this riff, um, and see what it sounds like over a thrash beat. And I was like, all right, that sounds cool. I'm going to see if I can add on to it. And then I just tried some other moves to complement that first move to see where it took it. And I find that you get a really different result when you write that way, because you'll do that for maybe 4 or 5 more times, and then you're at an even 16 bars. And then you go back and you press play at the beginning of that bar 1, and you're like, "What the fuck was I thinking? Like, what is this? It doesn't sound human." Uh, and you sit down and you try to play it, and it's tough, but it's playable, right? It just features all these moves back to back that you would never think of sitting there organically playing and stumble upon. Like, you don't stumble across those just jamming on an acoustic. You don't stumble upon these just noodling, you know? And I feel like that accounts for a lot of the sort of frenetic nature of those riffs, especially in OnlyFans. And I had half that song written, and I had this other half that I brought to Misha, and Misha was like, "Why don't we try changing it into something a little bit more ominous and like big and epic?" And the way the song evolves, it goes in that massive sort of groove section in the middle, and then it goes in this big old grimy outro. And that was a lot of actually Misha's idea. It's like, this song needs to take you on a bit of a journey and have more dynamics, as opposed to being this sort of like one note, you know, death metal riff fest, you know. So so he, again, he's sort of a master of arrangement, and knowing how to just add dynamics to an arrangement, add dynamics to a song, so it's not just a riff salad. So it's not just, look at me, how fast I can play. You know, it's it actually speaks. It actually takes you places. And I've actually learned a lot from him over the years, as far as learning how to piece together an arrangement so it flows organically and there's no point that's ever jarring. You know, it just feels like a natural sentence, as opposed to a bunch of words strung together.
I think I've never heard of someone putting a song together by the specific moves in each section. I think that's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, I
You
mean, they
could
all have to be, yeah, they all have to be in the same key and all that. Like, there's, you know, you stick to guidelines that you outline for yourself, but like, it's a really fun way to write. And I learned that from Misha, actually. He was the one who told me that that's what he did for a lot of his really notier songs back in the day. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And it's funny because if you're listening to this or watching this and you give it a shot at home, just see it through. Even if you think it sucks, just see it through and see what happens. And you'd be surprised at how it can change your creative voice. Even if you don't like it as much as your natural writing voice, just see what the results are like. And I guarantee you, you'd be kind of surprised at yourself.
I'm gonna try it, man. I'm gonna try it.
Try
We're
it,
gonna
dude.
we're gonna have a crazy snow day here tomorrow, so I'm gonna be at home, and I'll just that's I'm gonna definitely give that a go.
Oh man, yeah, that's a good excuse to hole up and try it. Let me know. Let me know how it goes. I'd be curious to see how it went.
Definitely, I'll send it over to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, let's all right. So I'm going to pause on music for a second because this is something that I always run out of time for, and I just kind of want to, a lot of people who know musicians, they know us as musicians. They know the guitars and just gigs and touring and everything else. And I think it's always so fascinating to kind of what else are you into? Like for me, like I like watches, right? I love watches. I love
Really?
watches. I nerd out on watches like crazy.
Really?
But like that's just not something that's, aside from what's on my wrist, you wouldn't know how nerdy I can get into that. So like
Have you
what
talked to Misha about watches yet?
I'm talking to you, talked to Jake, I've talked to Matt. I met him at NAM casually, but he was
Yeah.
super busy at the talking about because when the delay pedal was coming out. So I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm not going to bug him about that, but I would love to nerd out on watches with him too. But what's your
Really?
thing, man? What is like outside of this?
Serial killer documentaries. No, I'm just kidding. Um, man, these days it just depends. Okay, first of all, I am like an avid sports nut. Like avid. All I do, like if I'm washing dishes in my house or folding laundry or cleaning or doing whatever, I always have a sports podcast in. Always.
Cool.
So my wife doesn't even try to talk to me. She knows I'm like dorking out on basketball. She knows I'm dorking out on football or something. Um, and that's something I truly, truly, truly give a shit about. And again, so many analogs between being in a band and being part of a team. Like to
Hmm.
me, it's just goes hand in hand. It's beautiful. I love it. Um, and I love video games. I'm a big video game dork. Uh, Huge into that. The past couple years, I've gotten into sort of like mindfulness and meditation, and it's a big part of my life as far as maintenance. Um,
Hmm.
I never been like sort of big into sort of spirituality my whole life, but just having a way to sort of distance myself from stimulus, from things in front of me that could be distracting, having the ability to pull the curtain back and just be like, okay, the only thing I have control over is my mind, is my decision making, and just knowing that that's there, knowing that if I get too stressed out, knowing that if like I start worrying about things that I can't control, which is a totally normal thing, yelling in traffic, yelling at how cold it is, being pissed off at the state of the world, all that stuff. None of us can control any of that, and I've always kind of struggled with it, um, and finding a way to sort of harness that and identify it, and then take steps to rectify it, um, and find more peace and find more calm in heightened, stress levels. That's been a life changer, man. So just learning how to do that's been a big part of my life the past couple of years. Meditation. I know it sounds woo woo and it sounds really,
No, dude, I
really
get it 100%. I'm on board completely. I love it.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. Isn't
And
it funny when we talk about that stuff? We always build in that like, oh, hippy dippy shit, but like, dude, be
yeah,
proud of it because it's
yeah,
so important. And there's so much clutter and chaos in the world. And we all deal with various levels of stress. So more power to you. Like scream it from the rooftops. It works. It really does.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like that's a sort of a relic of previous generations, like
Hmm.
speaking ill of meditation, making fun of it, or therapy, or any type of like mental health regimen. Um, yeah, it's vital. It's vital, and
Yeah.
I have no shame in talking about it now. And like you, I'm gonna be 40 in October, so I'm 39 now.
Yeah.
So, things like that. As we, you know, get older, I become less of the fun-loving, free spirit, and like more of a somebody who cares deeply about just
Yeah.
maintaining. It's like going to the gym. It's like going to the gym.
Yep.
It's like the same exact thing. If you care a lot about fitness, taking care of your body, um, your brain's your brain's just as important.
I think it's interesting that you said sports at the beginning of that because for me personally, like music, it's between running the school, gigs, writing. I have a band. We put a song out a couple weeks ago, like trying to get placements. Like shit's happening constantly. Music is always in my head. I put on sports talk radio exclusively when I'm driving places
Oh.
because that it's and everyone's like, "What song?" I'm like, "No song. We're gonna listen to them yell about the Yankees, and that's gonna make me feel better about my life."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel the same way that like, dude, I don't listen to music podcasts really. I listen to freaking sports radio. I listen to sports podcasts because I don't know what it is about it. I don't know if it's like an escape ladder or like just getting perspective on something that's completely out of my realm of existence. But there's
Mhm.
something about it where I don't know. It's just calming to me. I love it. I love everything about
I
sports. I'm not a big like athlete these days anymore. I was when I was younger, but yeah, yeah, huge sports fan, man. That's cool to hear that.
yeah, I understand that, and as soon as you said that, I'm like, "I get it. Oh, I get it."
Yeah.
Alright, we'll go back to gear and stuff. So PRS guitars. I love PRS. I've been in love with them since I started playing guitar and been lucky enough to have a working relationship with them for a little over 10 years at this point. I love your signature model. It's actually being used in a lesson right now. Otherwise, I would grab it and whip it out because one of my teachers here loves it and he wants to buy one and blah, blah, blah. But their guitars are fantastic. That guitar is fantastic. I think the SE line is the best quality import line of instruments I've played in my life.
Yeah.
What was your process in developing that guitar? Just in general, I've seen you have some like 8-string ones and just all kinds of cool stuff. Like, what was that journey like?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, check it out. Before I continue, I have the 8 right here on the wall. This is
Oh no.
check it out. This is a rare, rare, rare bird.
Oh,
Um, yeah, there's not many of these around. Sorry, the light's all crappy in here, but
sorry, that makes it kind of cooler. It's like in the shadows.
yeah. So that's the 8.
Sick.
Yeah. Um, I mean, they were always local to Periphery. So Periphery's from Washington D.C. and they're out in Stevensville, Maryland. And I remember one time in 2013, I want to say, maybe 2013, they were prototyping the PRS Archon, their high gain amp.
Mhm.
And I guess they had some kind of discussion like, okay, what metal bands can we come out here to like get a second opinion from? And they invited, I think it was just Misha and I that day. And we came out there and we heard the Archon. We were blown away. And I met Paul Reed Smith, starstruck. He was starstruck at me. No, I'm just kidding. I was,
I believe it.
uh, I was starstruck at him, and he just came across as so no frills and down to earth to me, and he wanted to talk gear. He wanted to talk under the hood type of stuff about amps and guitars. He didn't want to talk about touring. He didn't want to talk about, all the things that most, people in his position, I imagine, would be interested in talking about. He didn't want to talk about fancy dinners or yachts or
Mhm.
traveling the world. He wanted to talk about what kind of tubes were in this amp and like old compressors and old microphones that he found in reverb. And I just thought that was so cool. And then I met him the following NAMM, and he and I had this discussion offhand at a bar. He was like, if I could build a guitar that satisfied everything you wanted in a guitar, would you be interested in seeing the results of that? And I was just floored because to me, I hadn't really been officially involved with any other guitar company before that. So to me, in my head, I was like, oh my God, like this could be the beginning of something. Bless you.
Thank you.
Um,
Sorry, there's no way to hide
it's all good.
that.
Um, um, and yeah, I had to say yes. And when they got to work on that first prototype, which I still have right there on the wall, can't see it right there.
Cool.
That one. That's the very first one built in 2013 or 2014. Um, I was just blown away when I got my hands on it the first time. I was like, this is the best guitar, this is the best 6-string I've ever played. And I played it on every Periphery tour after that for a couple of years. And then the rest is kind of history. The rest happened really naturally, and I became officially involved with them. But the SE came about 2 years later when we released that original 6-string
Mhm.
to the public, and I think it was like $4,000 or $3,800 or something like that. And people who played it said it was amazing. And I always loved the guitar. Obviously, PRS loved it. The thing is that it priced a lot of people out. And trust me, when I was growing up, I couldn't afford anything half that expensive, and the idea was basically, how do we get the spirit of that guitar in an SE model? How do we take all the sort of hallmark features of that guitar and put them in another instrument that doesn't break the banks without really sacrificing anything or sort of punishing the guitarist? buying the guitar. And along came the SE model, and every year we've kind of been iterating on it and seeing what we can do better about it. And yeah, it's just been an awesome ride with PRS, and I love the company. I love how much detail they put into every instrument. And I've played other brands before. This is going to sound so corny and like I'm a salesman, but uh, there's just no duds. Like I've never picked up one of the SEs off of a wall and be like,
Yeah.
wow, this one plays like shit compared to that one.
Yeah.
And that happens sometimes, with the scale that some of these companies produce their instruments. It happens, but there's just such an admirable amount of detail poured into everything they do, and they run it in such a mom and pop, down to earth, familial kind of way. And I think that's something to be admired as well. Just this really approachable nature to it, despite the high price tag of some of their instruments. Um, it's just such an approachable group of people there, and I'll always have love for Paul. Paul and Bev and Rich and all the people who they're family to me.
I completely like, and just the generosity. Like for me, like when I opened up this school here, I reached out to Bev and she sent me banners and lanyards and things to give to the students. We just did a giveaway with a Paul's Guitar SE model for Christmas. Like just I have archons in all the lesson rooms, like the
Dude,
newer model
yeah,
ones. So like people come here and like, we're a PRS school. Like, I mean, it's just
yeah,
unavoidable,
yeah.
unofficially, but yeah, man, like I understand it entirely. And
That's
man,
so
it's
cool.
just,
That's so cool. I didn't know that they had that relationship with you. That's amazing.
yeah, I mean, it's, I ask questions and they say no sometimes and they say yes sometimes, but it's just, when I first connected with them, I was touring in a band and things like that. And then as that part of my career wound down and the school side of it picked up, there was always this line of communication open, like no matter how less significant or more significant or reach, grew or shrunk, there just always have been someone that, cares about music. And then you see that, circling back to what you said, the quality, like they're just every single guitar feels like $1 million no matter
Yeah,
what price point you're touching it at.
for real. Yeah, yeah.
All right, dude. I'm gonna go to my rapid fire section if you'd like.
Let's fire.
Alrighty. So it's a series of this or that questions. Try to pick one. I know it's
Okay.
hard because the
Right.
answer to all of them is both or yes, but
Okay.
just do the best you can.
Okay.
And it's nothing political or funky, just mostly gear and band related questions. I usually ask a couple. I mean, I just praise the crap out of PRS, but some of the questions are going to be contradictory to that. But just play along
Okay. Okay.
circumstantially. Okay. Humbucker or single coil pickup?
Humbucker.
Okay. If you had to choose between a Les Paul style guitar or a Stratocaster style guitar,
Strat all day. All day. All day.
okay.
Not even close.
Okay. Now you're back to this Strat world, and a Telly walks in the room. Telly or Strat?
Probably Strat. Probably Strat
Okay.
still. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a tough one.
That's it. That's fine. Like I said, the answer is yes to everything.
Yeah.
Okay, the Strat walked away, and now a Les Paul and an SG style guitar walked in the room. Which one of those would you go for?
SG because of Black Sabbath.
Cool. Good answer. On your Strat, do you want a tremolo or you want a hardtail?
Give me a trim.
All right, it's a Strat. We're going to go do it all the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
22 frets or 24 frets?
24.
Cool. When you're for a guitar pick, do you prefer a thin, medium, or heavy style pick?
Medium.
Okay. If you're tuning to just standard tuning, no drop tunings or lower tunings, do you prefer 9s, 10s, or 11s?
9s in standard. Yeah.
Cool. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
What are you guys using for the lower tunings?
Oof. Jesus Christ. Ooh, man. So we drop C, which is our sort of bread and butter 6-string tuning. 11 to 56 is what I use. And then we have a tuning for 6 strings that has the 6th string all the way down to G. So it matches the G that's on the A string. And that I remember using like a 6T in the studio for that 6th string, just that 6th string. And for 7s, 10 to 52 with a 64 on the bottom, and then with the 8 string, I think it's Diodario NYXL, whatever their standard 8 string set is. Yeah, I'm less picky about that, but yeah, string
Cool.
gauges are a whole thing.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to. If I could go, that could be a whole hour in itself. I know.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were to grab a bass guitar, would you prefer a P bass or a jazz bass?
Jazz bass.
Okay. If you're grabbing an acoustic, obviously PRS is amazing acoustics, but if that was not an option, would you prefer a Martin or a Taylor? So something more vintage or more modern?
Martin.
Okay. When using a tube amp, do you prefer to use the gain within the amp or use a pedal in front of it?
Can I not say both? I would say within the amp, but oh man.
Both is
With
okay because you're tightening it up, I'd imagine, with the pedal in front.
exactly.
So yeah.
But if the amp can do it all on its own, and there are some amps. There are some
Yes.
amps that can do that. And when that works, whew, it's a good feeling.
Yes. I see there's one over your shoulder there where I know you can
Yeah,
press a
dude.
button and it tightens up quite nicely.
Exactly. So the Archon is freaking fantastic, but also that PV Invective that my bandmate Misha developed with PV, that thing is freaking sick too. Yeah.
Where did I go? Okay, so for your tubes, 6L6 or EL34 or something different.
34.
Okay. This is like a taboo one because it's very polarizing, but a 100-watt amp or a 25-watt amp? Because I know there's this big trend with these lunchbox, lower
Yeah.
wattage bedroom amps.
I would say 100. That's just what I always played growing up. Yeah.
Yeah. I recently got a Soldano SLO 100 and I can't get it over like 1.5 in this room because I'm blowing my
Really?
windows out. Yeah, but that's how it should be.
It's funny, yeah. Yeah.
All right, some effect pedal related questions. These are more complicated because all of them are amazing. But if you must choose between delay or reverb, what would you choose?
Reverb.
Okay.
Much more broader applications.
Good answer. I like it. Fuzz or overdrives, like a fuzz face or a tube screamer?
Tube screamer. Overdrive. Yeah.
Cool. Phaser or chorus?
Chorus.
Okay.
Because the 80s. That's why.
Both those effects are like not hip at the moment, but I love both of them. So it's like whenever I ask it, some people are like neither. I'm like, no, you have to pick one. Come on, like
that's not valid.
Geez, like
you're off the show, man. Yeah. But chorus, because the minute you have a cool clean chorus tone, it just sounds like Def Leppard. It sounds like White Snake. That stuff's awesome.
Yep. And if you want to do any Aussie stuff, I mean, you got to throw that on right now, right?
Exactly.
Wah pedal or whammy pedal?
Whammy.
I like that.
Yeah. Because Pantera, that's why.
Dude, I just bought a Washburn Dime Slime signature because it just in high school, a buddy of mine had one. And I was like, that's silly because I was jealous and it just came today. So
oh, that's sick. That's sick.
It's just like, it's so huge. It's such a weird giant body.
Yeah.
And I'm a tall guy. But okay. Yeah. Sorry. I distract myself. Classic rock band related questions. Beatles or Stones?
Beatles.
Cool. If it's the Beatles, is it John or Paul?
Paul.
I think Paul too. I love John. I think we would argue. I think we might not get along. Just because
he had distractions going on in life, and like Paul was always just, and then he did stuff later in his career too, where he didn't, he went down this proggy avenue with some of his later stuff. I don't know. Paul, definitely Paul.
Bowie or Dylan?
Bowie.
I agree. Zeppelin or Floyd?
Floyd.
Dark Side or The Wall?
Dark Side.
Okay. Pearl Jam or Nirvana?
Pearl Jam. Oh, fuck.
It's okay. I love Pearl Jam. It's cool. It's Pearl Jam.
Man. Pearl Jam.
I'm a big Pearl Jam guy. And just like in the last 6 months, I fell into this Nirvana hole. And I'm like, oh, I missed it. They're pretty cool too. Damn it. I've been like shitting on them forever.
Can I substitute either one of those for Alice in Chains? No.
See, you know what the funny thing is I originally had Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and then I had Alice or Soundgarden, but I think Alice in Chains shouldn't be fucked with. They're just awesome,
Yeah. They're always the best because they had the 80s in their shred style. Like Jerry could play like he was an 80s shredder, and Lane could sing. But then again, Chris Cornell could sing like he was from the 80s too. Anyway, it's a tough one, but Alice in Chains is at the top.
Yeah, I feel like particularly in the band choice section of these questions, the answer is all of them because they all do something incredible.
Yeah.
And then my final one, which is just there's just two camps here. Is it Hagar or Roth?
I mean, Roth, but Roth. It's Roth. But the thing is that I think the Hagar years get a lot of undeserved shit from people.
Yeah.
And then you go back and listen to some of the songs, and they're just great songs. And I feel like that band doesn't get enough credit with Hagar at the front of it. You know, it's
Yep.
always this the comparison is what kind of kills it for a lot of people, and they are unable to appreciate the Hagar years.
Because I think
Brilliant.
it's literally as though they are two separate entities that
Yeah.
just happen to have the same three core members with the different
Yeah.
dude up front. But yeah,
Yeah.
because they're both great in their own way. Yeah,
Yeah, and
sorry,
the
I know that
music's
one.
totally different. Yeah, it's less guitar driven with Hagar, but the songs are still great. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Cool, man. Those are my questions. Thank you for playing my silly game.
No, that's fun. I wanna do more stuff like that. We should just do, like, 5 hours of this next time.
Oh my God, dude. Like I have like a group chat with two guitar player friends and like we'll just do that to each other all day long. We get nothing accomplished. We're in different places in the country. I'm like, this or that, you have to choose. It's like F, marry, kill, but like just much cooler.
Uh,
Dude, thank you so much for your time. I mean, this has just been so cool. I love the music you put out and you're just a cool guy. So thank you for your time. I'm sure when this reposts, everyone watching this is getting a ton of value out of it. And I just thank you so much.
Dude, thank you, Rob, and again, I appreciate your patience and just, like, waiting for our schedules to line up, and you could have easily been like, "You know what? Just kick rocks, like, never mind," and I'm glad you didn't do that, so
Yeah.
again, my sincere thanks to you for having me on.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been my pleasure entirely, and it was definitely worth the wait. So thank you so much, and check out that record, everyone. By the time you're seeing this, you'll be probably pumping it already. But if you check this before, Void out on March 11th on all streaming platforms. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Be
Thank you,
well.
Rob. Take care, man.
See ya.
See ya.